Guess who? It's your old friend, Lex.
Robert Krulwich and his never-ending search for heretofore undiscovered economic indicators. You have discovered something about Lex Luthor and...
From the Secretary of the Treasury to this.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. Late in the 1980s, that is last year, a funny thing happened to Mr. Lex Luthor. For years, Lex, of course, was the mad, evil, scientific genius in Superman. Suddenly, however, he changed.
Over at DC Comics in New York City, where Superman comes from, and where you can still find mild-mannered reporters hanging out in the lobby, around 1 year ago, a new image of Lex Luthor appeared. Wearing a very expensive suit, he had become a financier.
He's now one of the most respected businessmen in the world, especially in Metropolis. He's basically...
He owns everything.
He is success.
Sort of Trumpian-like.
Very Trump-like.
But he's a horrible man.
Oh, yeah, underneath. I mean, he killed his own parents.
I know.
I mean, he's a sleazy guy.
And why did they change him into a financier?
To make Superman more identifiable to our readers.
So the nemesis, the kind of bad guy you chose, was a Wall Street sort of bad guy.
Right, right.
Lex Luthor runs LexCorp. He specializes in hostile takeovers.
Luthor! What about the stars?
Will you be announcing?
Easy, boys. Mr. Luthor has no further comment at this time.
Come on, give us a quote. Come on, talk to us.
They all want to know what I'm doing.
And here is his next target.
This is the Star Company's Central Complex.
Excellent.
Are you thinking of a long-term investment, sir?
No, nothing so plebeian, but what would you say to a takeover bid?
Is he a good financier?
Oh, yeah. He's a whiz. He's a genius.
Bears a kind of vague resemblance to people like, oh, Mike Milken, Ivan Boesky, Donald Trump, perhaps.
Well, we have a disclaimer in the front of the books.
Which says what?
Any resemblance to people living or dead is purely coincidental.
Well, as it happens, in the last year, Mike Milken has been sentenced to 10 years in jail. Ivan Boesky is on probation and has been testifying at criminal trials. Donald Trump has seen his empire collapse. And Lex Luthor, he hasn't been feeling very well.
After he had his hand amputated, he found that his body still contained radioactive poisoning, and he is now suffering from cancer from this. This is preoccupying his mind completely.
No, I would think so.
And he's slipping. He's been slipping. Up until...
Is business slipping too?
Yeah, everything is going a little sour.
This month's Superman comic, just out, has Lex Luthor climbing into an experimental plane and taking off on a flight to the South Pole. When somewhere over Peru, the plane pitches towards Earth and falls into the mountains. When Superman gets to the site, all that is left is Lex Luthor's prosthetic hand. Oh my God!
We don't know yet whether it was an accident or if he might have even been contemplating suicide.
But he is dead.
As far as we know.
As far as we know? What do you mean, as far as we know?
Well, we have a meeting next month to plan out the rest of this year's stories.
What we have here, then, this is another one of those end of the 1980s stories. You know the man is going to come back in some form. So obviously they've decided that being a businessman is no longer the evil thing to be in this decade. So that Lex Luthor will come back as something, I presume. Something evil, but something 90s evil. So we say goodbye to big business as the evil and say hello to something.
A politician, maybe.
You think?
What do you think?
I thought maybe, the only thing I could come up with, if I were trying to make Lex Luthor really bad for 95, 96,
right.
Rainforest polluter? Why do you say politician?
Well, I mean, that's what everyone decided that they hated politicians this year.
So Lex Luthor, mayor of Metropolis.
Ooh, there you go.
It's been a big summer for cartoon characters. Dick Tracy, a smash on the big screen. Bart and all the eccentric Simpsons. They're one of the most popular families on television. And now Spider-Man, who's been around for almost 30 years, is hitting new heights of popularity. The first issue of the newest Spider-Man comic book has sold a record 2.3 million copies. That's 3 times what any comic book has ever sold before. Joining us now from San Diego to talk about that is the creator of Spider-Man, Stan Lee, and here with us in New York, the editor of Spider-Man Comics, Jim Salicrup. Good morning to the two of you.
Good morning, Paula.
So Stan, why is Spider-Man so popular once again?
Well, I think perhaps it's because he represents every man. You know, he's not a really superhero in the sense that things are always perfect for him, but he has the same worries that you and I do. He has to worry about making a living. He has romantic problems and problems with his boss. He sells freelance photos on the side. And I think people find it a little bit easy to identify with him.
How have you kept him current, moved him from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s until now?
Well, actually, Jim has a lot more to do with that than I do because he's editing the book now. But it really isn't that hard to keep a character current. You just read the newspapers and you dress him the right way and you move him in the right genres, and we keep him up to date. He doesn't age very much either.
Stan makes it sound so easy, Jim. Is it that easy?
We try to make it fun, but basically what we've been doing to keep it contemporary is he got married a few years ago, and he's sort of growing up with his audience. Spider-Man was sort of the hero of the baby boomers. He was going to high school when they were. Now he's married and living in Manhattan, so he's grown up a bit.
But he's kind of a parody, is he not, of superheroes
A little
today?
bit. It's a little bit. I mean, I think on the surface there was a lot of parody, but at the heart of the character, Stan created a character that was very moral, very human, and that's what it keeps it going. I think if it was all a big joke, people would have gotten tired of it a long time ago.
Who are your readers now?
What's surprising is not only have our fans grown up with Spider-Man, but now that they're married and have kids, it's almost a whole family. It's the parents and kids are following Spider-Man together.
Stan, I'm curious, after all these years of working on this, if you form sort of an emotional attachment to this character you've created.
I feel as though he's my brother. I feel as though I know him intimately. And if ever he slips my mind, people that I meet keep talking about him and reminding me of him, so he's really always with me in one way or another.
How did you come up with the idea of his character in the first place?
Well, I had done a number of other characters before Spider-Man, and I was looking for a new superhero, and the biggest problem is finding a new superpower. You know, you have characters who can fly, characters who are strong enough to lift buildings and so forth. And it occurred to me somebody who crawls on walls might be fun with the powers of an insect. So I tried to find a name, and I thought, well, Insect Man didn't sound too romantic, and Mosquito Man didn't make it, and just sort of through the process of elimination, I zeroed in on Spider-Man. I thought that had a good ring to it.
And it's worked. Tell me
It seems to have.
why you think we are seeing such an explosion of interest in cartoon characters. What's going on out there?
I think people somehow feel far more strongly about cartoon characters. They tend to have a favorite actor or a favorite rock star, but with cartoon characters, I can't explain it, but they tend to always say, I love Spider-Man or Batman or Bart Simpson. And it's just something that they come in contact with when they're very young, develop strong emotional attachments to, and it seems to stick for a long time.
We only have a couple seconds left, Stan. Are we going to see Spider-Man make it to the big screen?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's a movie in progress now. We're developing it, and we hope it'll be a big one.
Stan, thanks for joining us this morning. Congratulations. Jim, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have both of you with us this morning.
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive.
Yes, Superman is middle-aged. He celebrated his 50th birthday with a big public party last night in New York, a high point in the year-long festivities which end in June. Even the mild-mannered mayor of Metropolis, also known as New York City, was on hand to offer his greetings.
Superman is like Peter Pan. He never grows old. And he's always there to protect the citizens of Metropolis.
Those citizens and millions more, both young and old, remain his loyal fans.
He fights the truth and justice for the American way.
I've enjoyed him all my life.
great memories for all of us.
Part of the proceeds from the bash will go to the National Foster Parent Association. And why not? When Superman first fell to Earth from the planet Krypton, he was taken in by foster parents.
Then we can keep it?
Oh, we'll try, Sarah.
That was back in 1938 when the idea for the superhero was born. That concept grew in leaps and bounds from comic strip to animated cartoons to a series of Superman movies.
Superman is up there with the flag and Mickey Mouse and Mom and Apple Pie as a cultural icon.
Even Washington Smithsonian Institution is honoring the hero of heroes with a year-long exhibit. Superman, it seems, is enshrined everywhere.
He's a wonderful symbol for America, and I hope he does continue to fly high.
While reaching that golden anniversary for a mere mortal can be a shock, not so for Superman. He's just resting up for the next 50-year battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
Who make magical, maniacal machines.
Lynn Brown, CBS News, New York.
But as Vicki Mabry reports, there's a whole new look to superheroes, and the crimes they fight are much more realistic.
We have some party crashers heading this way. You want me to have your cape dry clean, too, you big dweeb? Ever since Drake's chemical byproduct mutated me into this form, I've been nothing more than hired muscle.
He's called Original Man, and he's definitely original. He's a black comic book superhero. Teamed up with Mighty Ace, Dark Force, and Lone Wolf, they're out to rid the world of gangs, drugs, even AIDS.
We wanted to do something that showed our culture and then showed a certain amount of awareness, get some knowledge, and cover subjects that the mainstream comic books don't want to touch.
Anything that shows a truer sense of reality, people want it.
For Alonzo Washington and Tony Japa, reality means creating characters that represent life as they know it as black men. They've developed a series of comic books aimed at black teenagers, raising their social consciousness and dealing with black-on-black violence.
The average young African-American male has had a police officer step on his neck for no reason, throw him against a car. We want to address that.
What comic characters did you grow up with?
Superman, Batman, the Incredible Hulk. But the problem with that is seeing all those super characters kind of made me lose my own identity.
We think Caucasians are greater than we are because we don't get a proper balance. That has an effect on a young person's mind.
These comic books are beginning to have an impact on kids like 17-year-old Andre Smith, former gang member, father of 3, juvenile offender. Andre says these fantasy characters help turn him around.
So it tells me that, it's not no good doing little crimes and getting in trouble and going to jail and going to detention and all that, because it's not worth it.
Can y'all think of any fictional black hero?
Washington and his crusaders are fast becoming a conquering tool even in the classroom. They're being used to teach reading and self-esteem. Experts say these positive black images are long overdue.
They're seriously looking for someone to identify with. The creation of positive images strikes at the heart of the matter.
Alonzo and Tony are becoming superheroes themselves. They've sold thousands of books at home in Kansas City. They're charging into other markets now. Dark Force hits bookstores soon. He's fighting AIDS and packs a free condom.
Through a comic book medium, it is a way to expand their mind and make them feel good about themselves, and hopefully what they learn from the comic book they can incorporate in their lifestyle.
Lifestyles these superheroes are crusading to change. Vicki Mabry, CBS News, Kansas City.
But in this week's Hibb Report, Laurie Hibbert looks at a new batch of lesser-known superheroes who will soon be appearing in films themselves.
Like Iron Fist. You ever hear of him?
Iron Fist?
Exactly my point. He's just one of many new films in the works. And if you think that the more obscure superheroes won't work on the big screen, well, I have news for you. They already have. You probably recognize all these faces.
Wait till they get a load of me.
And most likely, you know that these characters are adapted from comic books.
What are you? I'm Batman.
What you may not know is that he is too.
Want to live to see another day, you'll be out of town by nightfall.
And believe it or not, so are these guys. For years, Hollywood cashed in on familiar comic book faces like Batman and Superman,
But lately, some previously unknown superheroes have made a successful leap to the big screen. And that success has got Hollywood gearing up to release a whole new generation of comic book movies.
It's an easy jump to make.
Kevin Smith is the director of films like Chasing Amy, Clerks, and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. He's also a comic book fanatic and owner of his own store in Red Bank, New Jersey.
Both are stories that are told told visually. And one just graphic arts and one is film. But it's a pretty easy leap to make, particularly if you're telling fantastic stories.
Artisan Entertainment has entered into a deal with Marvel Comics to tell many fantastic stories. In fact, theirs is one of the biggest comic book movie development deals ever. Their first property to hit the big screen? An obscure hero named Iron Fist.
Basically, Iron Fist is an American who was raised in a mystical city in the Far East by monks in a monastery. He was trained in the martial arts and learned to channel his life energy into his fist so that he can strike with the force of iron.
Why Iron Fist? It's obscure. I've never heard of it.
I think it's a very good example of one of these less familiar titles that has all the elements that make for a very good, very strong film.
It looks like other filmmakers are agreeing. Plans are in the works for movies based on other lesser-known comic book heroes like Daredevil, Ghost Rider, and Elektra. The challenge, according to Kevin Smith, is keeping the fans of the smaller books happy while engaging a much larger audience.
The interesting question is, which master do you serve when you're bringing a comic book to the screen? Do you serve the loyal audience that have been supporting it for years, or do you go after the wider audience? And you unfortunately have to fall toward the larger audience.
But it's not just the obscure books that are making the leap to the silver screen. The popular fan base will be happy to know that films for Batman, the Hulk, Superman, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four are in the works right now. And of course, the eagerly anticipated Spider-Man movie hits theaters with a vengeance this May.
I hear Spider-Man is phenomenal. Based on the trailer, I mean, that looks like they nailed it right out of the park. Yeah. And it took a guy like Sam Raimi, you know, the dude who was real handy with the camera, as we could see in the Evil Dead pictures, to bring it home. A fan to bring it home.
Other movies you may not know are based on comic books. The Matrix.
Was a comic book?
Yeah, was a comic book. And Tom Hanks' new movie that's going to be coming out called The Road to Perdition, also based on a comic book.
Superman, they told us, was dead. But happily, reports of the demise of the Man of Steel are seriously premature. John Roberts has been looking into death and rebirth in the world of superhero comics.
The cover says it all. He's back, for good. But why did he ever go away?
The world has been a mess since Superman was gone. One of the reasons we did this story was to try to make the world see that they shouldn't take Superman for granted.
Did the Man of Steel really die? Well, yes and no. Seems he was just in some kind of limbo. But old fans of Superman bent over backwards to find out.
I haven't read comics in years, but when Superman died, I had to pick up the comic books again and come back.
I just think it was really cool when he died. You know, that seemed to be like everyone was just panicking, like, you know, where's my Superman? I can't believe it. You know, this is so terrible type thing.
Terrible for fans, perhaps, but gold for DC Comics. The issue sold out in hours. The Superman's Back comic is almost as popular. The death and resurrection of Superman is just the latest trick to gain market share in an increasingly competitive industry. An industry that's growing faster than a speeding bullet.
The interest for this type of material and this genre has never been at a higher peak than it is right now, but every indication shows that it's nowhere near where it can be by the end of this decade.
In fact, sales have soared from $50 million in 1985 to a projected $950 million in 1993, an increase of 70% a year. A recent convention in San Diego drew 25,000 people. So what's driving this newfound popularity?
It's kind of like reading a book and reading a picture book and putting them together. You know, it's almost like a movie kind of, but it's not like action, you know, it's part of your own imagination, you know?
But what happened to the dweeb factor so often associated with reading comic books?
You know, it's still there, I guess, to some extent, but it's been supplanted by, you know, baby boomers and yuppies who are hanging on to their childhood, I guess.
And more women are coming into what was once a traditionally male-dominated market, which may explain Superman's new, hunkier look. More than 250 comics are vying for readers each week. And while the 50-year-old Kryptonian may not be as hip as others, he's still the all-American hero.
He represents everything every kid wants to be. You know, honest, upworthy. He's the first. He's Superman. There's nothing left to say.
Except perhaps, up, up, and away. John Roberts, CBS News, New York.
When kids made cultural icons out of superheroes, like Spider-Man and Batman, Superman, and Captain Marvel, superheroes were instantly recognizable. They were a bunch of muscular guys who wore capes and hoods and their underwear on the outside. And now they're back. Hollywood is engaging in superhero worship big time. Just take the Spider-Man movie. Not only did it get great reviews, it was the most profitable movie of the year, approaching the billion-dollar mark. Our story begins with Stan Lee, the man who 40 years ago invented Spider-Man for Marvel Comics and created the modern superhero. How was Spider-Man born?
You know, I've told this story so often, and it may even be true, but I was watching a fly crawling on a wall, and I was looking for a new superhero, and I figured, wow, wouldn't it be cool if a guy could crawl on a wall?
Did you realize at the time that this was a totally new thing?
No, not at all. I was just trying to make up some new characters so that I would keep my job, keep eating and paying the rent, and I hoped the books would sell. We didn't think we were doing anything revolutionary.
But Spider-Man was revolutionary. Stan Lee had broken the mold. He created something unheard of, an action hero with psychological problems, a slightly neurotic and fragile superhero.
He can be shot, he can be gassed, he can be hit very hard and knocked out. He's stronger than the average person, but he's incredibly vulnerable.
And Spider-Man's alter ego, Peter Parker, was just a dorky teenager, bullied by boys, rejected by girls, and indifferent about his superpowers. Yet, he struck a nerve. At first, the spectacular success of Stan Lee's Spider-Man seems bewildering. Who in his right mind would be interested in a nerdy loser who has no success with girls and is even ambivalent about his own superpowers? Answer: all those ambivalent, nerdy losers in America who had no success with girls.
As a matter of fact, my publisher hated it and didn't want me to publish it when I told him about it. He didn't like the idea of it being called Spider-Man. He said, Stan, people hate spiders. You can't give a book that name. When I told him I wanted him to be a teenager, he said, but teenagers can only be sidekicks. Then, when I said I want him to have a lot of problems, he said, don't you know what a hero is? And he wouldn't let me publish it.
But of course, Stan eventually prevailed.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's really so cool.
Which is why, 40 years later, Avi Arad is sitting on top of the world, arguably the hottest movie producer in Hollywood. Avi's biggest blockbuster, Spider-Man, which set a box office record, earning $120 million its first weekend.
Are comic books the hottest thing in Hollywood? I think so. I mean, it's very simple. They make money. That's what makes them hot.
Okay, quiet, folks. It's hard to imagine another Hollywood producer juggling more projects than Avi. Here he is on the set of The Daredevil, another Marvel property being turned into a film. Daredevil's about a blind lawyer, played by Ben Affleck, who becomes a superhero. Avi's producing Daredevil.
There's sort of two casts of Atlanteans. There's sort of the...
And here's Avi listening to screenwriter David Self pitch the script he's writing for Namor, the Submariner, yet another Marvel superhero. This, too, will be a movie produced by Avi.
Don't you people ever die?
Avi also produced the X-Men. He's producing the Incredible Hulk.
And action.
And of course, sequels upon sequels of, pardon the pun, Spider-Man spin-offs. Okay, take a guess. How many Spider-Man movies are there going to be?
Looking at my birth certificate, I think I'll be involved with at least 3. At least.
In other words, you think the franchise is going to run...
Oh, way past all of us.
But before Hollywood worked its computer-generated magic on Spider-Man, it was a plain old pencil that brought the superhero to life. Among the artists who wield that pencil today is Joe Quesada.
This is the part of it that's still, thank God, it's still done by hand. If not, I'd be out a portion of my paycheck.
Quesada wears two hats at Marvel Comics. He's an artist, and he's Marvel's editor-in-chief. Quesada comes to work like lots of other New Yorkers. He enters an office building, rides an elevator, but as soon as he walks through the doors of Marvel, he's inside an extraordinary comic book universe, a playground where they manufacture superheroes. It's a fabulous fantasy factory, and these are the artists, young men and women, who toil to tickle the imagination of millions of readers, young and old.
What we do here is the equivalent of the cavemen sitting around the fire talking about the great hunt, or talking about the great god of hunting. It's no different. We're just storytellers, and we tell stories of the heroic ideal. It's that simple.
What kind of mind writes comic books?
Any kind of a mind.
No. I couldn't do it.
I think you could if you're a writer. In fact, that may not be true, because I remember years ago Mario Puzo, who did The Godfather, worked at our company, and he said to me, before he wrote The Godfather, he said to me one day, "Stan, I'd like to write a comic book. I need some dough." So I gave him an assignment. I didn't hear from him for a while. 2 weeks later, he came back. He said, "Forget it. This is too difficult. I think I could write a novel instead." And he went out and wrote The Godfather.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
And I didn't even get any credit for that book.
Today, Stan Lee is regarded as the comic book industry's grand old man. He invited us to accompany him to the Golden Apple comic book store in Los Angeles to survey his work, almost the entire Stan Lee collection. Stan's the man who changed comics forever by bringing a modern sensibility to the superhero.
I like to think that what we do is realistic fantasy. We have to suspend disbelief in the sense that our character is going to have some superpowers. Is super strong, can crawl on walls, can fly in the air, whatever that is. But in order not to make it just a fairy tale, you have to believe in the person, and you have to believe that such a person might exist.
Jeez! And how do you view the superhero comic?
You know, I personally just am not that interested in it.
If Stan Lee revolutionized comics in the 60s, Art Spiegelman took the genre to a new level a few decades later when he created Mouse, the first comic book ever to win the Pulitzer Prize for Literature. Mouse told a Holocaust story, specifically the story of Spiegelman's father, a Polish Jew trapped by the Nazis. This was grown-up stuff, and it changed comics almost as much as Spider-Man did. Is the comic book world at a tipping point now?
Yeah, something's really afoot. I couldn't have even said that as clearly 6 months ago or a year ago, where Mouse, for instance, was seen as an anomaly. Now Mouse is seen as part of a larger picture.
It's a picture that includes serious comics, sometimes called graphic novels, that just like Mouse are winning readers and winning awards. Take, for instance, Chris Ware's Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest kid on earth. It's a blend of words and images that tells a story with depth and complexity, and it's not just for kids. Ware is a Chicago artist and writer whose work recently won a British Literary Award.
I still can't quite believe it, and it didn't actually dawn on me until I had left England that it had actually happened. I kept thinking this is a joke.
But it wasn't a joke. The graphic novel is carving out a niche for itself.
What's Papa's job? He goes on missions for Mr. Green.
Some are even being turned into movies like the recent hit Road to Perdition. Suddenly, the stigma that's always been attached to comic books is lifting.
Now, it doesn't seem like you really have to be ashamed of yourself if you have a comic book in your possession. Before, I'd hide my copies of comics inside a copy of Playboy so nobody knew I was reading one.
There was no shame in San Diego last August when thousands of people showed up for the annual comics convention. These are America's die-hard comic book fans, but their numbers are dwindling. Circulation is only a fraction of what it was a decade ago, and a far cry from the way it was in the 50s, when it seemed every kid had his face in a comic. The irony is that while sales of mainstream comic books are down, Hollywood is feasting on the books, turning the old comics into a billion-dollar industry. All the films you've got going now, take a guess. What are they going to be worth? What are they going to bring in?
Well, if you look at the studio that looks at revenues, ticket sales, DVD, these movies, they are all in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
So if each movie is in the hundreds of millions, you right now are looking at more than $1 billion, right?
Yeah, $1 billion is not, it wouldn't be unusual.
But Stan Lee says none of that money is finding its way towards him. The creator of Spider-Man, who's always been and still is a salaried employee of Marvel, claims he hasn't made a penny off the Spider-Man movie.
When I wrote these stories, I wrote them as a writer for hire, so I don't own the characters.
This doesn't put you in a state of rage?
No, I'm the kind of guy, I'm just interested in what I'm doing at the moment, and I don't dwell on it. I try not to.
Right, because it's painful.
A little bit.
Now, a guy like Stan Lee, who came up with so many of the storylines and characters, is he getting a fair shake?
Sure. Everybody's getting a fair shake. It's years of work by many, many, many people. There's not one individual that is responsible for all of it. Stan created great characters, and obviously, ask him. I think he's getting a fair shake.
Do you feel that you're being screwed?
I don't want to say that. I mean, after all, I'm still a part of the company. I love the people. I love the company. And as I say, I try not to think of it.
Stan says thinking about it only makes him unhappy. So what does he think about? Mostly about his next project. Nearly 80 years old, Stan Lee is still writing. And when he does think about the past, he thinks about some of his favorite lines, like this one, spoken by Peter Parker's Uncle Ben.
With great power comes great responsibility.
That's a line that I just tossed off, you know, and somehow people have remembered it and they've quoted it, and I'm delighted about that. With great power comes great responsibility. Wow.
Spider-Man lives by it.
Yeah, I guess
Very
so.
few other people with real great power do. Maybe that's the secret.
Maybe. But I'm sure glad I wrote it.
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.